We are back, and you're listening to the Critical Hour on Radio Sputnik. I'm Wilmer Leon, joined here by my co-host, Garland Nixon.
Thank you, Wilmer.
Biden, a threat to democracy. RFK Jr. says the U.S. president is weaponizing federal agencies against his political opponents, according to RFK Jr. For insight into this, let's turn to our next guest. He's the co-host of the Convo Couch and AM Wake Up on Rockfin, and the new show, Pasta to Go. Craig Jardula. As always, Pasta, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me on, gentlemen. You know, this is one of my favorite shows to go on, and I can't thank you enough for having me here to give my opinions on what's going around in the world surrounding us.
Well, isn't that a coincidence? Because you're one of our favorite guests, so it all works out. So President Joe Biden could be a bigger danger to U.S. democracy than former President and presumptive 2024 election rival Trump, another presidential candidate. Robert F. Kennedy has said Biden is the first president in U.S. history to mobilize federal agencies to silence his political opponents, according to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Your thoughts, Pasta?
I do agree with Mr. Kennedy over here, but only from a lesser of two evils argument, right? I don't believe that Trump is a free speech warrior by any means whatsoever. And same thing with the Republicans. I think they've obviously have showed their true colors when it comes to this whole Israeli-Palestinian situation, where they want to censor Palestinian protests and label them as being, you know, terrorist supporting, Hamas supporting. No. These people that are out in the streets aren't even really pro-Palestine. They're anti-death, anti-murder, anti-ethnic cleansing. So the Republicans and Donald Trump themselves aren't free speech warriors by any means whatsoever. But I think they are a tad ahead of the Democrats and Joe Biden themselves. I mean, this administration across the board has been so pro-censorship. They pretty much have set a precedent that if you are not going to work with the United States government, that being the big tech companies, if you're not going to work with the United States government and what we tell you every single time we summon you to Congress, then you're not going to be able to operate fully. You're not going to be able to make money. You're not going to be able to exist. And people like AOC have championed deplatforming. In fact, the day after she wrote a letter, Nico House, the Convo Couch, Graham Elwood Show, Frank Analysis, all these independent media shows came down right after AOC had wrote that letter. And that really represented what a lot of the squad and the young Democrats stood for. So at the end of the day, I have to agree with RFK on this particular issue that you can make an argument that Trump is the lesser of two evils when it comes to him and Biden.
You know, what's interesting is, and when we say Joe Biden, I think you are like a lot of us, we don't see Joe Biden as some kind of a powerful leader who's running something, you know,
making the decisions. Not at all.
You're right. Okay. And you've got to take this instrument of power, deep state, whatever you want, that's going on doing all kinds of things. Right now, I went to Google and I searched 2024 presidential candidate websites. Well, you would think that Google would give you the right. Well, the third, 1, 2, 3, the fourth down is JoeBiden.com, Joe Biden for President official campaign website, right? So that's the third one down, right? When I keep going down, I have to go all the way to the second page of things that pop up. And at 16, I find Marianne Williamson's website. Keep going. I don't see anybody else's. Oh, there's Vivek, who dropped out. I don't see RFK Jr. I don't see Trump. I don't see Cornel West. So basically, they put Biden. So if you search for Google, it appears that Joe Biden is the only one who's running. And in my opinion, that ain't an accident. That's the machine right there doing what the machine does. That's one of the things that Google or Facebook or these other things do to manipulate manipulate things. Your thoughts?
No, you hit it right on the nose too, as well. I mean, I just often think about, you know, as a sidebar, the Donald Trump thing. If that's on purpose to victimize him, because the more they seem to put him down, the mainstream media and the government, the more it ignites his base and the people out there. And I think if there's anybody swinging on the fence for, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I couldn't imagine. I think the majority of people already have their mind up. They're on team A, team B. But when you see these actions by the state and you see the Google search engines where, people obviously feel, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, companies like YouTube, companies like Google, they are definitely for the establishment. Now, people try to make it an issue, Garland, between Democrat and Republicans, say, look what they're doing to the Republicans. But there's a lot of Republicans who benefit for that same type of behavior as well, and get those things handed to them, like the Lindsey Grahams, like the Mitch McConnell, who's, obviously not, thinking about not leaving friggin' office, or just, he'll step down as leader, but he's going to keep his turtle battery running low self there to continue to make awful decisions while pushing for stupid wars. But those people, like I said before, the 2020 election showed you, top of the ticket, yeah, Joe Biden got it over Donald Trump, but look at all the establishment Republicans that reaped the benefits and got the coattails. That's a very fishy thing to think about. So we have to look at this treatment when you see Google as not Democrat versus Republican, it's the people versus the establishment.
I'm glad you put it in that context, because that's one of the problems I have with Kennedy's argument, is that he makes it a binary conversation, Trump versus Biden. Who's worse threat to democracy? And by personalizing it in that manner, then you lose the reality of neither of them are the ones calling the shots here, that this is the elite operating in their interest. Now, I understand, he's talking in an electoral political context in which there's Trump and Biden. But the other problem I have is he says the question was, who is a worse threat to democracy? And what I would say is, I'm not going to answer that question. But I can argue that Biden is. I can make the argument that Biden is much worse. So you said you weren't going to answer the question. Then you talk for 2 paragraphs answering the question.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I listen. That's a tough one there too. At the end of the day, I still think he made an argument, though, Dr. Leon, that the Republicans aren't any better, that Donald Trump is any better. Just he had mentioned that the fact that they're using the state entities, right, to weaponize it, the intelligence agencies to
yeah, but I think he has the argument. I think he has the argument backwards. I don't think the Republicans and Democrats are using the state apparatus to their benefit. The state apparatus is what is in control, and they are functionaries of that apparatus. I think he's got his argument backwards.
Well, yes, I agree 100%. And I wouldn't, they are calling the shots. I mean, I think somebody just said, my guest today on Pasta to Go was Keith McHenry, and we had talked about elections. He says, who makes that decision? At the end of the day, it's the CIA who makes that decision. And I agree there. I agree with that argument. But I mean, if you just look at it on paper and you do that whole policy analysis, and, you look at just the history of the last couple Congresses, and I think I was on your show once before talking about, with Matt Gaetz making a certain argument about Ukraine, and it was one of my heated shows with you gentlemen, but at the end of the day, if you look at it on paper, you gotta call it for what it is. I think it is the truth, and maybe I'm not grasping this completely, but I do think that the Republicans are the lesser of 2 evils on paper. But let's talk about the fact that they aren't free speech warriors themselves. I don't know. But I thought he did a good job with laying that out.
I'm going to take a different angle. Okay, you ready for this? All right, let me ask you
ready,
this.
But let's go.
You ready? Here, I got a question.
Yes, let's go.
Which one between Wilmer and Craig Jardula is the biggest threat to Garland's magical powers? Neither, because Garland doesn't have magical powers. There is no threat to democracy because you'd have to have a democracy to be threatened. In 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. There was no democracy for Bernie Sanders. Then I don't think there's a democracy here. So you could argue that they're doing bad things and each one of them's bad in a lot of different ways. But my opinion is we've had the illusion of democracy. People need to wake up to the reality that there's not a democracy, not argue that there's a threat to something that doesn't exist. And Margaret, I got to give Margaret Kimberly a lot of credit because she's the one who made that argument that I got that from. Go ahead. We got 1 minute.
Well, just quickly, you don't. First of all, we have to define what magical powers are. Magical powers might be different to some people than others. My people say that there is something magical about the way that Garland Nixon lays out things. So he does have magical powers in some way. And the answer to your question would be Dr. Leon, because he's in the room with you. He's closest to you. So obviously, if anybody could have the ability to stop magical powers, to wave a wand or do something, it will be somebody who's close to you, and that's Dr. Leon. And I'm just making this stupid argument because at the end of the day, the whole purpose is for RFK to get on TV in front of so many people. But if he made the argument that you made and Margaret Kimberly made, he wouldn't be allowed back on that network. So he has to find a way to kind of implement this message kind of, subconsciously.
Wilmer, I think I'm going to have to turn him into a frog for that.
Well, Craig Jardula, the takeaway from this brilliant conversation is Garland Nixon doesn't have magical powers. Thanks, man.
Disagree.
Greatly appreciate it. Craig Jardula, as always. Folks, listen to the Convo Couch. Folks, you've been listening to the Critical Hour here on Radio Sputnik. Thank you for allowing our voices into your space on behalf of myself and my co-host, Garland the Wizard Nixon. We hope you were informed and enlightened, and we look forward to talking with you all right here tomorrow on Radio Sputnik, unless he turns me into a frog. Be safe. Ribbit. Peace and blessings. We're out.